What would you do if you were doing your homework and it started talking to you? I'm guessing that most of us would probably run away screaming, but not this kid. Instead, he decided to befriend his new talking homework. I bet you're curious about how this all started. Well, then let me tell you a little story. Once upon a time in Japan, there was a young boy named Haruki. He was an intelligent student who always did his homework as soon as possible. In fact, he would complete his homework assignments even before he got home from school so that he could spend the rest of his evening playing with his favorite toy truck. One day, while walking home from school, Haruki came across a small wooden box by the side of the road. It wasn't anything particularly special looking, just an old, worn-out wooden box. But for some reason, Haruki felt compelled to pick it up. What was it about this random box that piqued his interest? We may never know, but the moment he picked it up, the box began to shake violently and magically fused itself to his backpack. When he got home, Haruki tried to take the box off his backpack, but no matter how hard he tried, it wouldn't come off. The box had glued itself to his backpack. What was he gonna do? His mother would be home soon, and she would start to worry if he didn't get his homework done. So with no other options available, he put the box in his desk drawer and went to work on his homework. Just as he began writing, a small piece of paper shot out of the box and landed right in front of him. Startled, Haruki watched as the piece of paper began to move. At first he thought it was an insect, but then he realized that it was actually a message written in kanji characters. The message read, "Thank you for retrieving me." Confused, Haruki replied, "What are you talking about?" Only to receive another piece of paper that said, "Please don't eat me." Then another, "If you open me, I will die." And finally, "I am your homework." With that last note, Haruki understood everything. His homework had come to life and was now hiding inside the box. And so Haruki spent the next few hours talking with his homework. He learned that its name was Koguma and that it was very shy. That's why it hid in the box when he took it from the road. And apparently it took quite a liking to him because it asked him if it could stay in his room. Although he couldn't exactly see how that was possible, Haruki agreed. So Koguma moved into his room. Haruki didn't know what to make of this situation, but he was also quite excited to have a friend to talk to when he came home from school. And since Koguma needed energy to survive, Haruki fed it pieces of candy. They quickly became best friends. However, there was one problem. Every night at 5 o'clock sharp, Koguma would fall asleep and Haruki would need to return it to his teacher. Which meant that Haruki needed to find a way to keep Koguma awake until 8:30 when school would end. If Koguma fell asleep before then, it would lose all of its energy and become nothing but a pile of ashes. On the first day, Haruki tried simply keeping it awake by talking with it. However, at 4:30, Koguma started to yawn, so Haruki gave it a piece of candy to keep it awake. But even that didn't work. Just as the clock struck 5, Koguma fell fast asleep. Realizing that he needed to step up his game, Haruki went to the store and bought plenty of candy to feed Koguma. But this proved to be a mistake because Koguma ate too much sugar and ended up bouncing off the walls with energy. It was so hyperactive that it knocked over Haruki's prized model truck. Enraged, Haruki yelled at Koguma and it immediately apologized. It was so ashamed for knocking over his truck that it once again fell asleep. Haruki tried to wake it up, but it didn't budge. And so he carried its sleeping form to school. When he handed it to his teacher, she didn't seem surprised at all. She explained that Koguma had chosen him to be its caretaker and that it needed his help to regain its strength. If he couldn't keep it awake, then it would turn to dust and cease to exist. But she also told him that Koguma was a very rare type of homework. You see, their kind only appears once every 1,000 years, and they're incredibly lazy. In order to avoid doing any work, they hide in boxes, wait for someone to find them, and then transfer their consciousness into the person's homework. This way they can force the student to do their work for them. But the catch is that they can only do this once a year. So the rest of the year, they just hang out with their host until it's time to transfer once again. The teacher also explained that in order to keep Koguma awake, Haruki needed to keep it entertained. But how could he do that? Well, she suggested that he take Koguma to her home for the night where it could play with her daughter, Rumi. That night, Haruki took Koguma to his teacher's house, where he introduced it to Rumi. Initially, Koguma was quite scared of Rumi, but eventually the two became friends. Rumi even helped Koguma regain its strength so that it wouldn't fall asleep. However, the next day at school, Haruki noticed that Koguma had transferred back into his homework. And although it had regained most of its strength, it had used up a lot of energy during the previous night's fun. So Haruki carried his talking homework back home. He knew that he couldn't rely on anyone else to help him keep Koguma awake, so he decided to take matters into his own hands. And what better way to entertain a piece of homework than with some good old games? Haruki and Koguma played hide and seek, tag, and even battled each other with foam swords. By the end of the day, Koguma had regained all of its strength and was having the time of its life. However, the next day, the same thing happened again. Koguma exhausted all of its energy and fell asleep right before school started. Haruki tried carrying it to school, but his teacher stopped him and said that she had a better idea. She took them both to a nearby park and left them in the care of a friend of hers. Her friend was a kind woman with a gentle smile. And when she saw Koguma, she welcomed it warmly. "Oh my, we haven't had a visitor in quite some time." Then she turned to Haruki and said, "You can leave it here as long as you like." Haruki was grateful for her help, but he couldn't help but feel a little lonely. Koguma was having fun playing with the woman's cat, but no one else seemed interested in talking with it. That's when Haruki had an idea. He grabbed his bike and invited the woman and her daughter to go for a ride in the park. They all enjoyed themselves so much that they ended up spending the entire day together. And by the time they got home, Koguma was completely exhausted and fell asleep right away. But Haruki knew that it wouldn't be for long. In a few hours, it would be time for it to return to school. Still, he wanted to spend some more time with his friend. So he carried it outside and laid it on a blanket under the stars. As they gazed up at the night sky, Koguma suddenly spoke up. "Hey, Haruki, thank you for everything you've done for me. I really appreciate it." Haruki was taken aback by its sudden speech. "Huh? Oh, it's no problem. I'm glad I could help you." Koguma continued, "I want to keep talking with you, but I can sense that my time here is almost up. I don't know when or how we'll meet again, but please know that I won't forget you. Thank you for being such a wonderful friend." Then it closed its eyes and whispered, "Goodbye." Haruki stared at his sleeping friend in disbelief. Was this really the end? Did he really have to say goodbye? Tears welled up in his eyes as he hugged his homework close. But then suddenly, Koguma opened its eyes and exclaimed, "Wait, I haven't finished transferring yet." And with that, it disappeared, leaving behind only a faint smell of lavender. Haruki looked down at his hands in confusion. Had he imagined the whole thing? Was Koguma really gone? Just then, he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Well, that was a relief. I was worried that you might try to hand me back a talking piece of homework." Haruki turned around to see his teacher standing there with a relieved expression. "So, did Koguma tell you anything?" he asked hesitantly. His teacher shook her head. "No, but maybe it's better if I don't know about these sorts of things anyway." Now let's hurry up and get home before your parents start to worry. As they walked together in silence, Haruki couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. He missed Koguma already. Meanwhile, deep within the box that had once been glued to his backpack, Koguma stirred. Its voice echoed faintly within the wooden confines. It's time to sleep now. Goodbye, Haruki.